Guys, Xilonen has been officialized today on stream, and so this is my full guide on how she works, how you should build her, and what her best teams are. Let's go! First of all, as you probably already know, Xilonen is a 5-star Geo Sword character, and following Chiori and Navia's releases that happened not too long ago, she continues a trend where Hoyo is trying to reintegrate Geo into the meta. However, unlike Chiori, who is strictly meant to work alongside Geo characters, Xilonen is more similar to Navia, in that she has synergies with a lot of different teammates, and honestly speaking, she's looking to be arguably the most relevant release since Furina came out. Specifically, she's unique in a way, because the way her kit works radically changes depending on the elements of her teammates. She can play in a strictly supportive way or a rather damage-dealing way, purely depending on what the rest of her team looks like. This comes from her elemental skill, which enables her Night Soul Blessing mode. During this mode, she'll create 3 sounds mixers represented by the little arrows near her frame. Each of the mixers represents an element, and their color will be the element's color. To start off, they will be Geo, but once a condition is fulfilled, they will switch color to match the element of the characters of the rest of the team. 3 mixers, 1 for each of the remaining characters on the team. This is where the duality of her kit comes from. If at least 2 of the mixes change element from Geo, it will enable a lot of supportive utility in her kit. Note that the mixers can't change their element to Anemo or Dendro, so the focus is on Geo, Hydro, Cryo, Pyro and Electro. So essentially, if at least 2 characters in the team aren't Geo, Anemo or Dendro, Xilonen will provide support for the team. For one, she gets to reduce the resistance on surrounding opponents for all the mixer's elements by 36% at talent level 10, very close to what Anemo characters can do with the Viridian Veneer set. These effects will last for 15 seconds after the mixers change element, so for longer than the Viridian Veneer set effects do, and more importantly, the resistance reduction will instantly apply with no conditions. This is very similar to how Zhongli reduces resistance through his shield, and as such is more versatile than what Anemo units can do, since in their case you need to swirl the specific element on the opponent. Secondarily, with her elemental burst, she gets to repeatedly heal the active character by a quite big amount, enough to contend and mostly beat the big single target healers we have in the game, so units like Bennett and Cookie. The burst heals kills off defense. Basically, as long as you have at least 2 characters in the team that are either Pyro, Hydro, Cryo or Electro, you will enable amazing utility on your kit, enough to make her possibly one of the best characters in the game. Note that you can even have 2 of the same element. So for example, if you play 2 Hydro characters and 2 Geo characters, all of these effects will still be enabled. As for her second playstyle, that applies when fewer than 2 of her mixers change element from Geo. This will commonly apply in a mono Geo team with 3 Geo characters for example, or teams like Xianyun Plunge with a Geo character. In this case, her kit won't have supportive effects, but rather it will focus on having Xilonen deal damage herself, by giving her damage bonuses instead of reducing the opponent's resistance, and making her burst deal more damage instead of healing. Moreover, she gets Geo-infused normal and plunge attacks as skill of defense, so she can be used as an on-field DPS on traditional mono-Geo compositions that include Goro. This looks great, because it gives her an alternative to her already amazing sounding supportive kit, but the thing is, it's just that her damage output is pretty shit. Her multipliers are okay-ish at best, and she doesn't get nearly enough offensive buffs from her own kit to compete with a high-tier meta DPS. Honestly, it seems more like a playstyle shoehorned into her kit for competition purposes, like they also did with Chiori for example with her own field play, rather than a really good thing she has going for her. Going back to her supportive playstyle now, the thing I've heard the most is whether or not she power creeps Kazuha. My answer is yes and no. The first thing I will say is that these characters are very similar in terms of what they provide offensively, in a funny way even. Kazuha is a character that provides damage bonuses for teammates through his kit, and gets to reduce resistance on opponents through the Viridian Veneer set. Xilonen is the opposite. She reduces resistance through her kit, and she gets team-wide damage bonus utility through the Natran supportive set, which makes her give a full 40% bonuses to the elements she triggers reactions with, in this case crystallites. On top of that, however, Xilonen is also healing, so in terms of just raw kit contribution, it does seem Xilonen is bringing more than Kazuha to the table here. However, practically speaking, it's more complex than that. Kazuha still has things going for him, namely his gripping utility and his damage output, both of which become very relevant in AoE scenarios. With Hoyo introducing a wave of small opponents even in boss stages, it does feel like Kazuha's positional impact is becoming even more noticeable nowadays. Plus, with how present Bennett is in the meta and on teams in general, even though Kazuha can heal the team himself, it isn't necessarily a loss as a whole. On the flip side, the Xilonen's technical advantages mostly come from how easy it is to apply support for the rest of the team. This comes in handy mostly in multi-elemental teams like Vaporites, Melt, Quicken, and to a lesser extent Freeze or Electrocharge, where it can be hard for the anime character to sword the right element. Xilonen doesn't have this issue, and this makes these teams much more consistent and playable, especially the Melt and Vaporites teams, since the gauges are really tricky there. Moreover, while Xilonen's healing utility can be diminished if she ends up having Bennett on her teams in some cases, the fact she has it by herself is still very valuable, as she single-handedly allows for the presence of Furina on her teams that way. Kazuha cannot do this, and this goes to Xilonen's credit. So, we're definitely looking at a unit that can have Kazuha-like damage buffing impact while being more flexible and versatile in most cases, and only really losing out on the grouping and some damage output. This will shake the team's meta in many ways, but before I talk about that, let me remind you that if you enjoy my content but you haven't subbed yet, please consider doing so because it really makes me notice your support. So, while I just now focus on how she compares to Kazuha damage impact-wise, let me just say that the biggest difference she'll make in the meta will be on teams where they can be used together. The perfect example here is Nuvilette, a character that doesn't exactly have many supports, and so even a character like Zhongli can be used as a best-in slot for him offensively speaking. Frankly put, Xilonen swallows Zhongli completely in terms of damage output for the team, and through her own healing, she also allows for faster and more consistent Furina Fanfare stacks generation. The only thing the team is losing here is the interruption resistance, which can be annoying if your Nuvolette is Constellation 0, but if it's Constellation 1, this variation becomes a no-brainer best team in the game contender. Secondarily, even in cases where she can't be used with Kazuha, she fits very well on teams that just had lesser offensive supports previously, so Molani teams, Navia teams, Itto teams. Molani in particular benefits a lot, because she was probably the least supported character in the game, and Xilonen is looking to be a game-changing addition for her damage-wise, since she also sort of enables Furina on her teams. Granted you're using Xiaoling here, there should be enough pyro application on the team for both Furina and Molani to vape semi-consistently at least, so the outlook is pretty great. Navia and Itto just got one of the biggest jumps in damage they could have possibly gotten as well. You can't play a triple Geo team in these cases, or Xilonen's support won't activate, but that's not a big problem. Honestly, I've been hearing for a long time how Geo was missing a Kazuha, and they just might have gotten one here, at least in terms of raw damage output. Then, multi-element teams like Melt Grizzly, Melt Ganyu, Double Hydra Raiden. As I mentioned before, Xilonen instantly reducing resistance for all elements on the team really comes in handy. In this specific case, especially for the Melt teams, where swirling cryo for the anemo characters is often impossible due to how dominant the pyro application can be on the team. As far as Raiden goes, there is a good chance this might end up being the best Raiden team period, at least at Constellation 0. Then also a lot of other uses, like for example her on Arlecchino teams instead of Xiaoling to further increase Arlecchino's damage output on Monopyro teams specifically, and also many other cases where she can be at least considered as side grade to Kazuha damage-wise, since her offensive support is roughly equivalent. Overall, a fantastic addition to the meta, and probably one of the most straightforward buffs to existing teams we've ever seen in Genshin. Now, builds-wise, she's a character that wants to be built with energy recharge and defense primarily, although it's only essential if you want her to heal on the team. In cases where you pair her with another healer like Bennett, this is not needed. Anyway, even if you want to use her burst every rotation, her energy requirements are not really massive, since she generates a decent amount of particles for herself, and the burst itself only has a 60 energy cost. Artifact sets wise, no brainer really, just give her the Nathan supported set. Giving her any other set would be akin to giving any set other than the Verdicent Veneer to Kazuha, which is just crazy 99% of the cases. Talking about the weapons now, I already talked about her signature in the last video I made, but since then it's gotten changed, so it's good to revisit it. This signature weapon provides team-wide damage bonuses on top of increasing her defense by a lot, maximizing her healing as a result, and some elemental damage bonus for herself too. Last time, the team-wide damage bonus was higher than it is now, and it made the weapon her best in slot in all situations. Now it's a bit different, as she still has another supportive option in Freedom Sworn that is perfectly usable. Freedom Sworn gives attack percent plus normal and charge attack damage bonuses, which is not as versatile as the general damage bonuses the signature provides, but in this scenario where you have an on-fielder that can fully take advantage of both of those buffs, like Arlecchino, Freedom Sworn ends up being better as of right now in terms of raw damage buffing. Alternatively, Alternatively, for free-to-play options, you can just use Favonius to take care of her energy requirements, or the not uncraftable too, since it gives a lot of defense and that's good to maximize their healing capabilities. Now, for her Constellations, they're pretty great, some of the best supported Constellations we've ever gotten all around. Her Constellation 1 makes her give the active character some interruption resistance, assuming she's being used in the supportive version of her kit. This sounds amazing at a glance, but interruption resistance she gives is much worse than even Sinjot's ranged swords, and is just equivalent to what characters like Sino and Ayato get normally. It's still nice, but definitely not a replacement to a shield. Her Constellation 2 got buffed since last week, so just like the signature weapon, it's nice to revisit it. It makes her give statistical bonuses to her teammates that differ depending on the element. This ranges from not impressive, like giving attack percent to Pyro characters, to really good, like giving 60% damage bonus to Geo characters. As a whole, the Constellation 2 can buff her teammates by even 20% in the best case scenario, something that puts it roughly on Ahida's Constellation 2 level. But it's worth mentioning that statistical buffs are more variable in impact compared to other types of offensive utility. For example, a high HP build Novolette will get a worse increase from Xilonen's buffs than a low HP build Wanwu. The same type of saturation won't typically apply to things like Nahida's Constellation 2, as hers simply reduces the defense on opponents. Constellation 2 also makes her always activate the Geo element mixers on her skill, meaning she gets to reduce Geo resistance even on mono Geo teams. Overall, I would say Xilonen is a pretty amazing character, and honestly in the future you might regret not pulling for her if you skip her now. This is the type of respect you will mostly just expect Archon supports to receive, but here she is, I guess, beating the odds. And I'm done for today. If you enjoyed this video, remember to subscribe, and bye bye.